When you scroll through endless listings of ultra-high-end gaming monitors, it's easy to get swept up by the glossy photos and the promise of 4K, 240Hz, and neon-lit backdrops. The frustration sets in when the box arrives, you plug it in, and the reality feels a lot less cinematic. The colors look washed out, the frame rate can't keep up, or the extra lighting gimmick just feels like a battery-draining afterthought. That's why I wanted to do a deep dive on the ASUS ROG Swift 27-inch QD-OLED bundle before you spend a chunk of your budget on a monitor that looks amazing on paper but might not fit your actual gaming or creative workflow. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, this isn't just a monitor, it's a mini ecosystem. ASUS ships the PG27 UCDM panel together with the ROG Aura Light Bar ALB01, a magnetic clamp RGB bar that snaps onto the back of the screen. The idea is to turn your desk into a sort of ambient cockpit, syncing the light bar's colors with whatever's happening on screen. If you've ever tried to game in a dark room and felt the glow of your monitor bleeding into the background, you'll understand why that sounds appealing. But the real question is, does that extra flair translate into anything useful, or is it just eye candy? The core of the bundle is the 27-inch QD-OLED panel. Unlike traditional LCDs, OLED pixels emit their own light, so you get true blacks and an almost infinite contrast ratio. In practice, that means a nighttime shootout in a game like Valorant looks dramatically different. Enemies hidden in shadows are genuinely invisible until they move, and bright explosions pop with a punch that you don't get on a typical IPS display. The 4th generation QD-OLED tech also claims sharper imagery and crystal clear textures, and when I ran a few recent titles at native 4K, the level of detail was undeniable. Fine textures on character models stayed crisp, and UI elements didn't get lost in the pixel crowd. Now, the 240Hz refresh rate and 0.03 milliseconds response time are the specs that make this monitor stand out for competitive players. In fast-paced shooters, every millisecond counts. When I tested Apex Legends on a RTX 4090, the motion felt fluid, and there was no ghosting even during rapid camera pans. The GSINC integration handled the frame rate spikes without the usual tearing you see on a non-adaptive panel, so the image stayed stable even when my GPU dipped below the 240Hz ceiling. For people who rely on split-second reaction times, that consistency can be the difference between a win and a loss. That said, the performance you see is heavily tied to the hardware you feed it. To truly push 4K at 240Hz, you need a top-tier graphics card. A mid-range RTX 3060 will struggle to maintain that frame rate in modern titles, and you'll end up in the 6090Hz range, which feels like a step back from the monitor's potential. So if your rig is still on the older generation or you don't plan to upgrade soon, the extra refresh rate is more marketing than reality. It's a classic case of a monitor that can outpace the computer it's paired with. The Aura Light Bar is where the bundle starts to feel like a niche add-on. The bar attaches magnetically to the back of the monitor, and its 3 lighting modes can pulse to match on-screen action, stay static for a mood setting, or react to audio. In a dark room, the subtle glow can reduce eye strain by providing a peripheral light source, and it does make for a cooler aesthetic when you're streaming or recording. However, in a well-lit room, the effect is barely noticeable, and some reviewers have pointed out that the RGB strip draws a noticeable amount of power, which adds to the overall energy consumption of the setup. If you're not particularly interested in ambient lighting, you could easily skip the light bar and just buy the monitor on its own. One practical strength that often gets overlooked is the custom heatsink and the Neo proximity sensor. OLED panels can get warm under prolonged high brightness usage, and the built-in heatsink helps keep temperatures in check, meaning the panel can sustain bright scenes without throttling. The Neo proximity sensor detects how close you are to the screen and adjusts brightness accordingly, which is a neat touch for people who frequently switch between sitting close for work and stepping back.